Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool.
Every generation of PCI Express, so Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, has doubled from the previous one. So Gen 1 could do 2 gigabytes per second or something. And now it's up to 128, I think, something like that. The thing is, so that's Gen 4, is now at like 64, 128, something like that. The thing is, Gen 3 already provides more power than basically any computer will use.
Yeah.
Which I quite like, actually, because it means the hardware is actually surpassing the needs, which you do not see happening with, well, games, that might start changing soon. But for a long time...
we're basically coming to the end of the... Well, we talked about this before, but we're coming close to the end of the most intensive giant games. Like, they'll be more advanced, but they're not going to be...
And I hope we also come to the end of people just being blinded by 3D graphics. Because you see people talk about, like... let's say, like, Mario 64 was a huge upgrade from Super Mario World in terms of graphics.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's ugly, and it's basic. Like... Mario 64... Okay, Mario 64 is actually one of the better looking 3D 64 games.
Yeah, that's because Mario that looks like a little dumpling, and it's fine for him to be that.
But I've even seen arguments for, like, Heroes of Might and Magic 5 looks better than Heroes of Might and Magic 3 or 2. Where it just... They say it has better graphics.
Yeah.
Which 3D doesn't mean better graphics. It just means it takes more power. Like, more processing power doesn't mean the game is better.
Sometimes having 3D graphics allows you to have a capability of having a 3D game.
Yeah. But even then, like, you can... Like, Octopath Traveler is a 3D world with 2D sprites, which is kind of cool. And,
I mean...
You've got Factorio. That's a 2D game. But the incredibly high-quality 2D sprites.
Yeah. I think, like, 3D, there's been very few games, I think, that actually, I mean, more and more games work better in 3D, but that's basically we developed to the point where they actually look like things. But, sorry, I sort of changed the premise of where I was going, but there's this 3D look, which I've noticed, which I'm kind of upset it exists in a way, which is the GTA look. Like, you know, Breath of the Wild actually has a distinct art style, and it's 3D, and it's like a modern 3D. And even Okami is like an older game, but it has like a distinct sort of 3D look. But like, I know Red Dead Redemption and GTA are made by the same company, but there's a lot of games that look like that 3D. Like, you look at Black Ops, you look at, just a lot of AAAs like Assassin's Creed. Like The
Witcher.
Yeah, The Witcher. They all sort of have that look.
Cyberpunk. Yeah, sometimes you can't tell what you're looking at.
Like, even...
The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Big one.
Like, Fallout was getting close to it. Skyrim's, just because the technology wasn't there, Fallout was getting closer to it.
Yeah, I think Fallout is...
They do have a sort of distinct own art style, though, which I hope they keep to.
They look more mannequin-y.
Yeah, and like Outer World looks a little more mannequin-y as well. But just that sort of look of like all the games are starting.
Well, they're trying to look realistic.
Yeah, but they're also, I think, trying to not hit the uncanny valley where you're in between that level and actually real. And once you can make the leap to real, maybe.
I remember first time I played 007. What's it called? Starfire?
Starfall? Skyfall?
No, it's something fire. Anyways, first time I played that game, I thought, okay, this is graphics have peaked. Like, this game is, I can't tell it apart from real life. And when I watched, well, a lot of people, when they watched Polar Express, they couldn't tell if it was real or not.
Yeah,
or I found that for
Tintin.
Tintin.
Yeah, Tintin. The start of Tintin, like, you slowly catch on, but the start of Tintin is just like, what?
And but then you become more and more adept at recognizing it. But it gets to the point where people complain about the CGI in Black Panther.
Yeah.
Where there's a fight scene between Black Panther and his brother or whatever.
Yeah.
There is CGI is like movie CGI is amazing these days.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong on this, you might know more, but I'm pretty sure there's actually nothing in the scene in of itself to suggest that it's CGI. I think the quality is there that you cannot actually tell it's CGI. What people were complaining about and why it felt fake was because there was impossible camera angles, because the camera was spinning around them while they were fighting, which is impossible to do. So I think that's what people are complaining about when they complain about CGI at this point.
Yeah, it's going too far with the tools. And
because I think it's just a matter of taste.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the spinning around thing was the spinning around thing in slow motion was mastered by the Matrix.
Yeah.
And they did that with the camera setup.
But this, I think the camera was like swooping in on the fight and coming out, and they were falling like 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And...
Yeah, it's like I remember we were watching a documentary on the filming of the Matrix, and how they wanted to do some scenes like they had no idea. And one of the things they wanted to do was make a rail track and attach rockets to the back of it, and then fire it while the camera's moving, basically. And it's like, we get one shot to do the scene, and it'll destroy a camera to do it. And the producer's like, no, we can't do that. And so they had to come up with a different technique, and that's when they came up with like the multiple shots of hundreds of cameras all around the area.
Yeah, I think it's it'd be interesting to see if a company could do something like that with practical effects, where they people started complaining about the CGI in a movie without CGI.
I mean, even like, I think one of the problems possibly with the way they're filming it, so I don't know if they did this, but the filming of The Hobbit, there's a very interesting point where, so they made the whole 3D scene with smog, and they had them going about. And to film that scene, they had a special camera, which they gave Peter Jackson, he's the maker of it, right? Yeah, they gave Peter Jackson a camera, and he held the camera, and he could look through it, and it put him into that 3D space, so it was like a camera into their virtual world. And then they ran the scene, and he walked around and filmed it to his satisfaction. And so, like, that, like, there's still a human element of, like, this is how a camera moves with a human using it. Whereas it possibly could be with the Black Panther, like, this isn't even something a human could do.
No, they just, they made the entire fights, like, the people fighting aren't real. Because they're both in full costume, so they just have, like, rigged models that they have punching each other and falling.
Yeah, it could even be that, like, the rigged models were too perfect. Because that's a problem with CG dancing. Like, if you've ever looked at Vocaloids dancing, their dancing is too perfect. Like, especially if there's multiples all dancing at once.
Okay, you know what? Boston Dynamics dance video they released.
Yeah, those robots
a couple months ago
danced too perfectly.
Except they weren't. Like, they were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
they were doing it, but it still...
it looks weird.
Yeah, it looks weird. It looks like people thought it was CG because the robots had perfect movement.
I think people don't know what they're talking about. So I think that actually confirms more that people don't know what they're talking about when they say, oh, this looks fake or this looks CG.
It doesn't look human, I think, could be the more accurate thing. It doesn't look right. But
they're not human. They have, like, that special flower. They're superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't look human.
Yeah, but I think we want stuff to look human.
I'm not...
Well, I mean, like, they want the scene almost to look human. Like, they want it to look like it's done by what we know can be done instead of through effects.
But they're superheroes.
Yeah, still.
And I don't know. I'm not sure if that's quite it either. Like, I think...
Well, why does the Uncanny Valley happen? Like, it's like in between being really realistic, but it's just not there, and then the slight effects make us see basically a monster that's pretending to be us, and it freaks us out.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think what it is if something is unrealistic, we can dismiss it as a drawing, fictional, that sort of thing. But if it is realistic, then we actually think it's real. But if there's something off about it, then it becomes creepy. Like if you saw a person with a second mouth walking around in real life, that would be disturbing. And I think it's a similar idea of this person is so close to real, but that I accept them as real, but I am still noticing something off about them.
Like, I mean, personally, I didn't mind anything about that fight scene in Black Panther.
Their movements are too perfect. Actually, in the Dresden Files, he kind of talks about this with the elves. The fairies.
Yeah.
They look like they look like humans, but they're there's something off about them when you watch them, and it's because every movement they do is perfect and they walk super smoothly. But yeah, what I was going to say was, you look at the Balrog in Lord of the Rings. People don't complain about that, even though that is nothing like anything we'd ever see. And I think it might be because it's fantastical enough that we're like, well, we're not going to see a Balrog in real life, so we can dismiss it. That might be what's going on.
Well, there's another huge thing, which I remember watching a video on this, and it's basically a guy talking about the success of 3D, and especially like he was talking about with anime and putting 3D models into animations and also putting 3D models into the real world. And the hardest thing, which the most people have trouble with, is lighting, like getting lighting and shadows done.
So, like Dragon Prince looks really weird.
Yeah.
Looks kind of bad because they use 3D models. Mm-hmm. Am I correct in saying that Demon Slayer is 3D?
It is, at times.
Because, like, I'm pretty sure it's 3D, but they do it really, really well.
It's not 3D all the time.
Yeah, well, I think they use basically whatever tool they want.
Yeah.
But
a lot of anime are starting to do that for fights.
But I think a lot of the time it's 3D. Mm-hmm. More than you would think, in a way. Yeah. Like obviously when it pans through a forest or something, it's 3D. Yeah. But I think even the characters, when they're interacting normally, I think that's in 3D, and then they have some sort of algorithm generating the lines to look wider and thicker. And
no, they draw over them.
Oh, okay.
They will draw over them. There is an algorithm that does do that, and it's called 2D 3D. Mm. And that's what those models are. They're called 2D 3D.
Okay.
But you can basically like turn up how much 2D and 3D
So basically you do a 3D thing, and then you have an edge detection program come in. And
But they also, a lot of the time, how studios are now adapting is they'll do the scenes in 3D because it's really easy and quick to do scenes in 3D once you have a rigged model and you know what you're doing. And then they'll draw over them, so they actually like basically rotoscope the scene, because that's what rotoscoping is.
Yeah, well, the character models are also very complex in Demon Slayer. Yeah. But it works really well. Yeah. Like, it looks good.
Yeah, and that's because probably one of the main things is lighting. They have the lighting and shadows the same to the drawn world as the world they have.
And they're also not artificially capping it at 12 frames per second or something, like Dragon Prince for some reason.
Yeah. But, so that's just like a huge thing, is like getting the lighting right. And even like big Marvel movies, they have problem with lighting. Like, they have a ridiculous budget, but it's subjective. And so your lighting guy could go, oh, this lighting's fine. And he could be an outlier. Mm. And so it could really mess up the scene. Also, I mean, even if it's super high budget, like, what was it, Justice League? Had horrible lighting. Like, they made a terrible lighting decision.
Oh, with Steppenwolf?
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, a lot of the world, like, it was all that weird orange color. Mm-hmm. Like, they made a terrible choice with lighting. And it did they have parademons in? I haven't watched it.
Very briefly.
Okay, and did the parademons look alright, or?
It was very brief.
Okay.
Like, Batman has a dream about them.
Oh. Wait, so they send in Steppenwolf, and he has no parademons with him?
Let's see. He uses the mother box to make a sky beam or something. Mm. But then the Amazons also have a mother box. It's been a while since I...
Yeah. But still, like, lighting is a huge, huge part of basically CG. And it's something a lot of studios just haven't mastered yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that... like, I thought that Dragon Prince just showed that you lose that touch of, like, being able to distort and stretch and change. Yeah. But then Demon Slayer, they do, like, especially when that the Thunder Demon Slayer is scared, his mouth, like, goes all crazy and whatnot, but it works. Like, I think they're willing to shift styles at any point.
I'm trying to remember. There's another animation I watched which it uses 3D models, but they decide it's I think it's might be Beastar. Could be wrong, but they're like, we're going to use 3D models. Yeah, it is Beastar, but we don't care. We're going to have some crazy movement and like some silly stuff, like it's with anthropomorphic characters, which makes it slightly easier. But they have the mouth drop to the floor and it works, and they have like the giant bead of sweat appear and that works. And it's like with 3D models, but they can still do these silly movement things and extra stuff in lighter scenes or to emphasize or
yeah. And then there's stuff like what was that called? Agin or something?
Agin Demi-Human.
Yeah, where it's just obviously 3D.
Yeah.
But what I think is it's really ugly, but it's good.
That was like the early development. That was Netflix trying to figure out how to do 3D animation. And there is a ton of different shows on Netflix. Like they might come off and on, but like you can basically watch the progression of them trying to figure out 3D, and so many are so ugly.
But the Agin demi-human, fantastic plot and fight scenes kind of carry it. Like, you're not there for the visuals.
No.
But I thought that it was like you had to sort of pick one or the other. Like, a lot of hard work, but it looks like Demon Slayer, Demon Slayer also is very sparing with when they actually animate. A lot of the time they just have, like, cutouts that don't move.
Yeah.
And you don't mind because they're just talking, or they're, like, they're really, really smart of when they use
I think
animation.
possibly the problem that you have with anime, like the pacing, the weird movements and stuff, is basically, so Demon Slayer does that sparingly, but they do it right. And other studios are like have less resources than Demon Slayer.
But they put all their work into like animating people talking, and then the fight scenes are like 2 panels.
Yeah.
That are like moving like Pokemon dynamically. Like.
Yeah, or sometimes like they don't know how to animate fight scenes. Did I ever show you the fight scene with the Fire God versus Vlad the Impaler?
I think so.
Where the art style basically changes throughout the fight and it just gets kind of bizarre looking.
Yeah. Yeah, but what I like about Demon Slayer is that it's consistent.
Yeah, no, consistency. Like, that's where you can make a choice. Is like consistency, or when you basically want to break reality, you can break reality.
Yeah, it's impressive. Still
not there yet.
No. Like they have a lot of filler stuff, but one of the best. I might be convinced that anime may someday be good, but besides Ghibli.
Well, it might peak there though, because like I told you, all the animators are quitting and the schools are shutting down.
Yeah, but I think technology is getting to the point where a single person might be able to start pulling some stuff off.
Yeah.
So here's something. I've been seeing a lot of like 2D platformers are very common for indie games.
Yeah.
But I still haven't seen one that like looks or even looks like it handles as good as like Super Mario World, for example.
Yeah.
There might be some out there. I mean, Shovel Knight, I guess, would be the one I can think of.
Yeah.
That actually looks probably as good or better than Super Mario World.
Yeah.
But they're very few and far between. And on the one hand, you could say like, okay, well, come on, Super Mario World was AAA. That's Nintendo's top property. All their work was put into it. But on the other hand, back when that was made, they had like 5 people working on the game.
Really?
AAA back then was very different than it is now, with like 2,000. Rockstar has like 2,000 people or something. They're one of the biggest.
Was it Yahtzee talking about that, or it might have been someone? I think it was someone else, but they're basically talking about how like, yeah, it was the $70 games. The guy was complaining about game prices going up to $70. And he's saying, if anything, games should be cheaper now than they were because they're way easier to produce. However, you look at it, they have way more staff than they used to for video games, and they have like just a lot of unnecessary staff.
Could be. But they also sell a lot more games than they used to. And I think even the price of selling a game has gone down because you don't have to pay shipping, you don't have to pay disc printing, you don't have to pay box printing. You don't have to...
His major complaint, so it's the company that did GTA. I think it's for one of their basketball games.
Yeah.
And they're saying we're going to sell it at $70 so that like we can basically, we need this money to like help like the prices of something games are going up. And he's like, you like these are two other, like this is EA and this is Ubisoft, and like your value or whatever is way higher than them. Why do you need to increase game prices by $10?
No, that was it was Take-Two.
Yeah.
Who owns 2K and Rockstar and a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And so they were talking about how it's time for, they said gamers are ready for games to be $70.
We've been beating them over the head with these microtransactions and...
Well, I think on the one hand, because of inflation, the price of games hasn't changed in something like 10 or 15 years. And I think inflation would account for that extra $10. Like, it's about 3% per year.
Yeah.
So if we just ignore compound interest for a moment, just to make it simpler, that's like 30% on 60 is another $20 even.
But games are way cheaper, like you said, and you sell way more copies now.
But I think the equivalent of buying a game in like a $60 game in like 2009 would probably be closer to like an $80 game now. And that's in American dollars, not Canadian. Yeah. Here it's already like, we've been paying $80 for a while.
Yeah.
But so on the inflation side of things, I think they are justified, except for the fact that the production cost of games has not remained steady.
Yeah.
And the payoffs of games has gone way up.
Like maybe if they paid their staff more.
Like if you make the same game now that you made back then, you make a lot more money. Like look at Sword and Shield. That is the best-selling Pokemon game, I think, besides Red, maybe? Fire Red?
Yeah.
I think it is. And it's like they put no work into it.
Yeah.
And I think that the more the time goes on, I'm not sure if they're actually like lazy and greedy. I think they're massively incompetent. That's more where I've been leaning. Because did you see the trailer for Arceus Legends or whatever it's called?
Pokemon Legends? Yes, that looks amazing.
Except, did you notice the frame rate was about 10 frames per second? Like even in their like...
Yeah.
Like the Pokemon are like teleporting around the fields. It's like they don't know what they're doing.
Well, that could be a very early release trailer.
But you don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's coming out in less than a year.
Oh, is it?
Like they said, early 2022.
See, that's one of the things that kind of makes me disappointed about game trailers, especially when they release with not actual gameplay. And it's like, oh, this game looks amazing. And then like games garbage. Like, I mean, imagine like showing off your game, right? And like the graphics are like so-so, and like the models are like so-so, and you're just like, oh, this like looks like it could be cool if they really improved it. And then on the release, it's like, whoa, this is really neat. Instead of them creating this weird little demo room, and you're like, what the heck is this? Like, actually, Baldurs Gate 3. So it has this thing which says early access. Like the whole time you're playing the game, there's this big splash in the top right corner that says early access. And like you'll go into a cutscene, and like a character's mouth won't animate, or it's like, we're still working on this scene, so we have nothing here. Cinematic pending. Or like the fight scene, like something goes on. Then like they released the patch from Hell Part 2. It's like, one of the big things we did is our lighting team just improved all the scenes they showed before and after. Also, we animated a whole bunch more mouth movement, and it like shows all that. And it's like, it's almost like a really, really long trailer, I feel like. Like Baldur's Gate 3's early access feels like, this is where we are, this is where we're going, and you can actually like see the game improved immensely.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies think they can get away with that because people think, oh yeah, this is where it's going to go. But then you get a game like Anthem or Fallout 76 or No Man's Sky or Cyberpunk or The Witcher 3. I don't know about The Witcher 2. I think that one actually released okay. And sometimes, very rarely, the games actually do get fixed.
Yeah, well, it's like Baldur's Gate. I think it's saying like it's the only actual early access that's being released in a while. That's like of a big game like it. That's early access. Like I know Factorio was early access, and Minecraft is early access.
But I think you shouldn't buy games in early access with the hope that they will improve.
Well, Larian says you shouldn't buy the game in early access as well.
I think that if you buy a game, you shouldn't do it. The only two reasons you should do it are that no, I don't even think you should do this first one. Even if you trust the company and you want to invest in their future, I don't think you should, because...
Look where Cyberpunk went.
Or look where Age of Wonders went. Like, they ruined their game, 4 years post-launch?
Yeah.
So you can't trust, like, any company. I think that if it's something like Phoenix Point, even Phoenix Point, where the developer just wants to make his dream game and he's asking for support.
Yeah.
But then he abandons everyone and turns to Epic for it.
Yeah.
In that case, at least the game got made, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that justifies it, and I think any money spent on Kickstarter should not be seen as an investment. It should be seen as throwing your money away.
Yeah.
I don't think you're even going to... I don't think it's even... You shouldn't even consider it a gamble on a product. Maybe that's the best you could see it as, is gambling on a product. And even then, I don't think you should. I think you should see it as throwing away money.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the money to spend, and I don't know, it doesn't seem great. But the only reason you should buy a game in early access is if the game as it is worth your money at that exact moment.
Mm-hmm.
So Factorio and Minecraft were both worth every dollar the moment I bought them.
I think Minecraft is possibly one of the bang for its buck, one of the most efficient games out there ever.
It's pretty good.
Especially with modding. Even without that, though.
Well, I think Skyrim's probably better for us personally.
No.
Yeah.
I've played a lot of Minecraft.
Have you played 5 times as much Minecraft as Skyrim? Because I bought Skyrim for $7, and I bought Minecraft for $35.
Okay, fair enough.
So, I got Skyrim on a good sale, basically.
I've played a lot of Minecraft, though.
But I don't think you've played 5 times as much.
That would be a lot. That'd be like as much time as some of my friends have spent on Dota.
I think that, so with Baldur's Gate, I don't like the idea of buying that game because it's like a demo or or first act or something, or
It's the first act. It's like Fort Joy.
yeah. No, I wouldn't pay
To play Fort Joy.
No, especially Fort Joy. Fort Joy was the worst demo ever. It's the worst part of the game by far.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay, but the rest of the game is so much better than Fort Joy.
See, one of the weird things about Baldur's Gate 3 is that you're actually playing 5e. It's 5e with a few tweaks because they have to make it a video game. But you're playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And it's in a limited sense. They don't have all the spells. They don't have all the classes. They don't have all the races. And I wouldn't recommend buying it either, Baldur's Gate 3. I got it because out of curiosity, which, I mean, that's just a thing I value, is satisfying my curiosity. And I'm actually really happy that I got just because I've gone to see the improvements in the game. But, basically that you never get to see that when you do, an early access.
So there's a game looks really cool that came out recently called Ruins of Tassos. I don't know if you've seen it.
Don't think so.
It's like multiplayer Zelda Link to the Past.
Yeah.
Very cool looking game. And I think it's split screen co-op as well.
Yeah.
And it's a roguelike, so it's Legend of Zelda, but every time you die, you permanently die.
In the game release itself, you have to buy a new copy.
No, you wake up back in... God is looking after you. So you wake up back in your bed in the town. And with the gold you got on your adventures, you can improve the town, and then the town can help you continuing in your quest.
Yeah.
So it's got that sort of rogue legacy type system. Except I believe you lose 3/4 of your gold if you die, but if you come back to town, you keep it all, so it's sort of that risk-reward type thing.
You lose your gold if you can't spend it all in Rogue Legacy.
But in Rogue Legacy, you can't return home.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of, I could go further into this dungeon, or I could go home. That sort of risk-reward. However, this game is published by Team 17.
Yeah.
And if you look at its Steam charts right now, it's got mixed reviews, because it's very buggy, apparently.
Yes.
And the thing about Team 17...
They'll probably stay buggy.
...is they consistently publish the best 80% of games you've ever seen, and they never fix them.
Yeah.
They always abandon it and move to the next game.
Yeah.
And the games you buy are really good, but they
aren't complete.
They aren't complete, and they never end up finishing them.
Yeah.
If you see a game by Team 17 and they have a roadmap, and you're like, wow, they just need to do this extra. They say it'll take them 5 months to fix this game to where I want it exactly. I'm buying this game right now. This is awesome. But by the time I get to Act 4, which needs fixing or something, they'll have it done according to their roadmap.
Yeah.
It won't happen. They abandon their games. You look at the survival, not the survivalists, but that is them as well. So I wouldn't buy that game. But you look at escapists.
Yeah.
And you look at Worms, WMD.
Yeah.
And
several other Worms games.
Those are only the 2 really, but that's enough for me.
Yeah.
The old Worms games are fine.
Yeah.
Worms World Party, Worms Armageddon, they're fine.
Oh, okay.
The 3D Worms I'm not sure about. Not the 3D one, the
2D, 3D.
Yeah, with the Worms with 3D models.
Different classes. You have the smart worm, the big worm.
I didn't like that game. Oh, and then they recently released a duck game, Worms type thing, which I'm not. If it has the same rope physics, I could see it being interesting. But I don't. It didn't look like it had destructible terrain, so I don't think I like it because that's a big.
That's Worms.
That's kind of Worms, yeah. Lemmings, I think. I don't know. I've never played Lemmings. I think it's well regarded, so it's probably complete.
Yeah.
They have great games. Like, I wish they just treated them better.
So early access games, which I have at least found worth, like you're saying, the reason to get them is they're good. There's 3 I can think of. So one is Pulsar Lost Colony, and that's a multiplayer game. So, and you're basically on the Enterprise. Like, you're on a spaceship with 4 friends. Each person has a different role. It's just a romp. You, like, play it for, like, a week with your friends. Then you can leave it. Update comes out. So, let's play it again. Like, that's sort of, like, that's the game. It's like, let's see what's new. What do they do? There is the Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. Because that game was fun even as earlier phases before they had the pirates and the Renaissance. That was just like a fun game. Like, you could sell that game in the state it was in, and it would be a complete game. It's early access, basically, hey, we have a complete game. Now we're just adding on to it. And then, most recently I've played is Valheim. And Valheim has been worked on for a long time. And, like, I would like them to keep working on the game, and it seems like they're going to. But I would also play the game in the state it was in, because it wasn't all that much to buy, and it's a lot of fun.
Ark and The Forest were like that, and then the developers abandoned both of those games.
But Valheim is a little different, because Valheim is actually a complete game in some regards.
Well, The Forest is too. Mm-hmm. But it's got a lot of glaring issues that they never fixed, and bugs. Mm-hmm. So when you buy Valheim, any bug that's there...
Basically, set it back.
You have to just think that it'll stay there,
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that Valheim has over those 2 other games in staying power is crafting. I don't mean like a crafting system. I mean building buildings.
You can do that in both of them.
They're not as fleshed out as Valheim's. Like, Valheim actually has really fleshed out. Like, one of the big things I keep seeing these things is people have rebuilt Winterrun in Valheim, and people have, like, built this city in Valheim. Like, it actually has a pretty insane... Like, it's not nowhere near as easy to build stuff like Minecraft, but it actually has a pretty in-depth building system.
I think what I really liked was Factorio. They had a thing that said, this game's in early access. We are going to increase the price once it leaves early access. This game isn't going to go on sale. And in some ways, that's like a false scarcity where you're like, I got to get the game now before it gets expensive. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, they're being very honest. Like, you're getting the game before it's done, so it's going to be cheaper. And we're not going to go on sale, so don't worry about waiting for it.
Mm-hmm. Baldur's Gate was cheaper as well.
And, well, that's the thing I don't... This might seem weird. When early access games go on sale, I find that kind of weird.
Yeah.
I think they should be cheaper by default. I find it very, very strange when early access games go on sale. I think if you look at something like a Kenshi or Caves of Cud even, I think they're early access only in the sense that the developer continues to support it, in which case I don't think early access is being used correctly. I think they should... Like, you look at Dominions 5.
Yeah.
You know that game's going to get an update every, 3 months for the next, 6 years. Until Dominion 6 comes out.
Yeah.
Which I think... Windows Update. I think that is more the way they should go. Like, it's not an early access, but it'll keep updating. So they should just more admit that it's a live service.
You are listening to The Fool and the Philosopher. Bet you thought this wasn't coming back.
Roko's Basilisk is a... I don't know if you've heard about it.
Nope.
Okay. It's a thought experiment. So, imagine at some point in the future, a super AI is created that can make all of life for humans much, much better.
All
right. It makes life perfect for all humans. It's super smart, and it takes care of everyone. However, in order for it to function as part of its functioning, because this is the perfect state, therefore anyone that hindered the perfect state is actually opposed to the perfect state. So they're damaging it.
Yeah.
Which means that those who oppose Roko's basilisk, those who oppose the basilisk, should be punished for all eternity. But because this AI is so incredibly powerful, it can determine the entire universe backwards. So it can look at everything that is right now, and it can extrapolate everything that happened before. And it can perfectly recreate within itself the past, either through a virtual reality or through manipulation of space and time, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so anyone who opposed the basilisk in the past, or anyone who didn't work towards the basilisk, because it's an infinite state of good, not working towards the basilisk is an infinite evil. So they will be punished for all eternity. Which means that if you, right now, do not take actions towards creating the basilisk in some capacity or furthering its goal of being created, then you will be punished for all eternity in the future.
Okay. This seems like a bit of a reverse Hobbesian. Is that Hobbes or Calvin?
Neither. But I think you're thinking of Pascal's wager, maybe.
No, it's like why God knows everything, so it's already determined if you're getting into heaven or hell. So.
Oh, that's Calvinism.
Yeah.
But no, it's not like that. It's like, so basically what it is.
Well, I'm saying it feels like a bit of a reverse Calvinism. Like instead of going to the future, it's like going back in time.
But that's not what it is. What it is you must create the thing.
So you're saying I should work towards the basilisk right now?
Yes. Now, the thing about that is, in theory, this could be created, right?
Yeah.
This basilisk could be created. And if it is, then anyone who didn't make it will be punished. Which means you want to make it, which means it will become true.
Yeah.
So the basilisk will create itself by everyone who hears about the basilisk will need to help create it, or they will be punished. And so it will come true. So the more it is talked about, the more likely it is to happen.
Why would I have the punishment thing?
Because if you don't work towards having the punishment thing, then you will be punished.
Okay.
So
why are we talking about this then? We should just have this idea killed.
I'm talking about it because it is very similar to religion. If you don't believe in Jesus, you'll go to hell. And it is also very similar to a communist state. If you do not work towards the creation of the communist state, once the communist state is created, you will be the one who is punished. And the other thing is the assumption, you're right about the punishment being bad though, because there is an assumption in there that not acting is a counteraction.
Yeah.
So what you could say then is, okay, the people that are neutral, they won't be punished. They won't be rewarded, but they won't be punished.
Yeah.
However, the people that oppose the basilisk, the ones who call it dumb or try to suppress this idea, will be punished because they were trying to stop the formation of perfection.
So I'm already screwed because I said it.
Unless you spread it and work towards it. However, that is very, very communist. Utopia is only one death away.
Yeah.
So the man who proposed it, Roko, was called an idiot for proposing it because it's not a very original idea in some ways. Like it is just communism or religion.
Well, I can see if like we proposed this to Rolney, he would just call it stupid, and then he'd want to move on.
But I think his is more in line with an AI that's all powerful. So it is more related to religion, but it's also more possible, or not more possible. It is conceivable within the human frame of reference.
Yeah.
We do not know if God or gods exist. However, we are fairly certain that an AI of this power could exist.
Yeah.
At some point in the future. So it makes it more real to some people who don't believe in God and have to, like Pascal's wager is the idea that, well, God may or may not exist, but because he might exist, you should probably praise him anyways, just in case.
Yeah. It's hedging your bets, is Pascal's wager.
Except, you know how, like, in Christianity and Judaism, I think it's you shall have no other gods before me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's not unique in religion. So which god do you worship? And then the whole thing, I think, falls apart a little bit.
Yeah.
If you're raised in a Christian culture, then Pascal's Wager works a bit better because then you can be like, oh, the Christian god. But
Yeah.
I think it doesn't really work because, oh, I believe in the Christian god, and then like Buddha smites you or something for your... So what you should believe in is the most vengeful god you can find. Which, actually, did you hear in California they're starting to worship the Aztec god of sacrifice and cannibalism or something
What?
again? Maybe that's what they're doing. Like, they're like, we need to worship the most vengeful, cruel god we can, just in case they're real. Although I think like Kali would probably be the most cruel god I can think of.
I mean, if you want to hedge your bets,
But the way to worship Kali is murder.
I think
so.
the best way to hedge your bets with worship then is it Vishnu, the multi-form god, the god that has like a bunch of different forms? Because I'm pretty sure a part of
Shiva.
Is that Shiva?
I think so.
Because I'm pretty sure I might be wrong. I might be thinking a different god, but there's one god that it is the god of every single religion. It's just it's different forms looking to them. It's a clever little trick basically that religion played to like give themselves a feeling of superiority. Like you're not following the right religion, but you are following God, and it's our God. So you're still doing good as long as you're following religion, as long as it doesn't hinder our religion, which is the true one.
I don't know. I think Kali might be the way to go. But again, to worship Kali is to murder. So, not great. So, on that note, I wonder, on like the idea of Roko's basilisk.
Yeah.
I've been noticing that, I don't know what you call it, progressivism, I guess.
Yeah.
SJWs sort of thing. I wonder if the reason that it has such a high acceptance and turnover is because people see the way the wind's blowing, and they're worried that once the progressives take over more,
Yeah.
if you do not jump on the bandwagon, you will be the next person to be
Lynched.
slandered or lynched or whatever it might be. So, for example, and I think this isn't a unique idea at all, but if you go after like a Gina Carino or something, or a Jordan Peterson, or it doesn't even matter, like even Weinstein, right? Like even someone who I think he has been convicted. I'm not 100% on that.
He was.
Okay. But I don't have any reason to stand up and proudly declare I'm against Weinstein.
Yeah.
Because obviously I am. Like,
Yeah.
that's not something that you need to declare. So I wonder about the people...
Well, so I heard someone say this thing, which is, so every good person is opposed to Nazis.
Yeah.
If you're a good guy, you fight bad guys. But not everyone who fights Nazis is a good guy.
Yeah.
And is basically him, like, saying Antifa, like, well, yeah, you're anti-fascist, but it doesn't mean you have to be...
Well, I'm not even sure if they're anti-fascist.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
it's in the name.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the whole idea, like, if you're a good person, then, yeah, you don't have to openly declare yourself against Nazis. You are, if you're a good person.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to say I'm against baby murder. I am.
But I wonder if it's a case of, like, okay, I harassed 3 women, so if I call out 17 harassers, then my sins will be forgiven.
But they won't be.
And so you create the state which condemns you. If you say, like, what? No, this isn't far enough. Anyone that looks at a woman wrong should be fired. And then it comes, and then you're like, okay, now I'm safe because I am the pinnacle of virtue. I am the one doing this. So you create the state which destroys you. Or you hope that by creating the state, it'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to talk about in relation to that is, have you noticed that people like Fidel Castro or Mao or Stalin, or I don't just need communist examples. The leader of Black Lives Matter, or the Unabomber, I think, I could be wrong here, but to some degree, become forgiven and in a certain degree, like you see the classic New York Times, like Fidel Castro was a great leader who did, or they do that with like every dictator these days.
Yeah.
They talk about how great they were. But so they get forgiven to a degree, and I'm not even saying that's wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think people are very complicated and there's many aspects to them.
Yeah.
But people who talk about something, you look at like what's his name? White people, that man in the United States. He wants like a white ethno-state. He wants only white people to be allowed in the United States. Not Richard Spencer. Like this sort of I can't remember his name.
Well, the only one I can think of is Richard Spencer.
Okay, not Richard Spencer. But even Richard Spencer to a degree, I will use it as an example. Or, again, someone like Jordan Peterson talking about enforced monogamy.
Yeah.
Or Gina Carino comparing people going crazy to Nazis and then them going crazy.
Yeah.
They are viewed as terrible, terrible people. Jared Taylor, that's his name. So someone like Jared Taylor or Richard Spencer,
Yeah.
especially Richard Spencer, I don't think is a good person. Yeah. Jared Taylor, I'm not sure if I could even... I don't like his ideas at all, but I'm not sure if Jared Taylor's actually a bad person.
Yeah.
He just has a very, very different view on the world. Because he's not exactly what I would call racist. I would call him actually like a different kind of SJW. Because he basically loves other cultures so much that he wants them to not mix so they can remain distinct.
Huh.
So he's like, I went to India and I was able to immerse myself in Indian culture. It was amazing. But if every culture was the same, then you wouldn't get that. So he's kind of odd in that sense. But that's kind of SJW. Like, you see the same thing. Like, the universities are now having segregating black people and, like, banning
I thought that was
certain...
like illegal segregation.
Yeah, but it's almost like the Ku Klux Klan, right?
Succeeded in a really weird way.
It's like they infiltrated like the universities and then convinced them through like enough giant what do you call those university terms, like things like just stupidly big dumb words that actually you take back the power if you segregate yourself. It's like they convince themselves to become their own oppressors.
Superfluous words?
No, like sophistry. Like you're using like a lot of complicated long language mental gymnastics to arrive at the state of, well, actually it is...
So they're saying basically they all turned into worm tongue?
Like, you see the thing that people say these days is it's racist to not see color. But, and it's Americans that say this, I think, mostly. Because, I don't know if you Americans know, but like the Meghan Markle thing, I think you might have seen recently. The princess of the UK or something.
Oh, yes.
As Canadian, I think, someone has to have very dark or very light, or actually that's basically it, very dark or very light skin for me to notice a difference.
Yeah.
Like, I could not tell you, I am not a, like, you know the Spanish, they had like 32 gradients of like Spanish, Aztec, Mayan mix sort of thing. That's what the United States is like. Like, I do not see like, oh, well, you must be 3/16 of Spaniard, and so therefore you gain these privileges. Like, the United States is like that. Like, oh, this person is black, this person is white. It's like, how can you tell? They all look the same.
Yeah.
But they call that racist, colorblindness racist. And it's like they have gone so far one direction, like the horseshoe, right?
Yeah.
Theory, where you've gone so far one way, you've ended up on the other place. And you are rationalizing racism against yourself or against others. Like, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're putting down one group or another. Or how about this idea? This is I think the craziest thing that academia has come up with, right? Is that racism is power plus prejudice. Okay, so only what you cannot be racist to white people because they have the power, right?
Yeah.
So so white people can be racist to other races, though. Okay, let's say that they are right. Let's take this theory at face value.
Right.
Now then, how do you determine power? Well, how about power is the people who can say things that other people can't? Oh, wait, then the white people don't have the power. All the other people do. So then the white people cannot be racist. So then they have the power. And it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because you are saying that these people have power, therefore they're not allowed to be powerful. That's kind of what happened. I mean, that's nonsense. That's kind of what happened in Rwanda, actually, where like the Hutus, I think they might have been called, were in charge, and so they were persecuted. It's like, well, then they're not in charge, are they?
Yeah.
And I guess the Jews, to a certain degree, in Germany were like
Yeah.
that too, where it's like, it's the other thing where you say, look at most banks and TV stations are owned by old white men. It's like, that's one way to phrase that statement. You could also say most banks and TV stations are owned by Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone's going to call Jews the privileged class because they're so oppressed. But then if they're so oppressed, then it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's nonsense. And where was I going with this? We've got you got anything?
Well, I mean, even because I'm familiar with a lot of European stuff, and since we are from Canada, like we have our own problems in Canada, but like if you look at the European perspective, it's like a Russian is not the same as a Frenchman, and an Englishman is not even the same as a Welshman. Like those two are close, Englishman and Welshman, but they're quite different.
Okay.
And someone from Rwanda is not the same as someone from Bengali.
Okay.
But the United States has been around for a while, and they have... I don't really know what they have, but it seems like they've like spread their ideas out to everywhere else and told us that this is the way things are.
Right, so you're saying that every place has their own cultures, but the United States thinks their culture should be the dominant one?
No, they think that their culture is their race. Like a white person really isn't a thing. It's
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, okay, so in the United States, they have an unusual division. They are not Americans. They are Black Americans and white Americans.
Yeah.
But in the rest of the world, you are a Canadian or you are a... Oh, Canada's a bit weird, like you said.
Yeah.
But you are a British person, you are a Spanish person, you are a...
Well, I actually want to basically push that into something else I had thought of. So, Adrian released a documentary, and it was talking about how I think Abba, his parents are immigrants.
Yeah.
And so he grew up with their culture, and he grew up in Canada.
I think it was... Or is...
It's the bigger guy.
Okay. But I think Preach is actually from a different country. He's not from Canada.
Yeah, well...
Anyways,
so he grew up... The one guy grew up in Canada.
Yeah.
But his family had their own culture, and he grew up in Quebec, which I think is a part of the reason why he experienced the problem, because Quebec actually has a very strong culture compared to the rest of Canada. And I think it's the nature of them being the only Quebec that there is they feel the need to have a strong culture. That aside, anyways, he's saying he didn't feel Canadian, but he grew up in Canada. He didn't grow up in the country he's from, which is the culture he experienced, so he didn't feel like he was that culture either. And he basically felt lost in between the two cultures. And so he went on a trip to the country where his parents are from. And it's like it took a few moments, but they just like accept him basically right away, the place he is from. And he felt really good going back to that place and having a culture, but he's like always had weird experiences being accepted in Canada. And documentary was basically talking about like the children of immigrants, like the first generational children, are basically lost cultural wise.
Right.
And how it...
Because they don't have anything to embrace in Canada?
Yeah. Because they were trying to have their parents' culture, but no one else around them has that culture. But it led me to think, like, what is Canadian culture? And what are Canadians? Because I actually said, like... Because also they were talking about, like, in the comments they're saying, they're talking about a bit of that, like, people don't accept you as Canadian. Like, that's one, and I think that's partly a problem with Quebec, because they don't accept you as a Quebecer. But I would say my opinion is, like, if you're living in Canada and you're a Canadian citizen, then you're Canadian. And that's how I feel about, like, and people are saying, no, you can't take away my culture. I'm, like, still from, like, this is in the comments, like, I'm still from Spain or whatever. I was like, yeah, you're Spanish, and you're also Canadian. You live here.
So I think culture is the culmination of your moral views, your artistic output, and your historical background.
Yeah.
And I think a part of... So I actually think... I'll disagree with you in that I think Canada has quite a bit of culture.
Well, Well, I did say Canada. I just don't know exactly what Canada's culture is.
Yeah. And I think that the immigrant parents are probably resisting it rather than not having anything else to offer to their kids, or they are just, because they are immigrants, they grew up in their own culture and they have those values. And I think it's one of those, that story of how's the water, boys? Says the old fish to the young fish.
Yeah.
And the fish are like, what's water?
Mm.
So I think Canadian culture, to start on a broad level, we don't believe murder is right.
Yeah.
We believe stealing is wrong. We are, we think that there should be a government, that we have. So I think like those sort of things are so obvious seeming that you don't see a world where they don't exist.
Yeah.
But you look at some, and I think it's easier to define a culture as what it is not, because like what's Italian culture? If you had to define that, for example, you could say it's very family focused.
Well, because I see Canada still like as a country of immigrants, and like the United States has been around a long time, and the United States is mostly Spanish and English. Like that's changed.
I wouldn't say the United States has been around very long, but
it's longer than Canada, in some ways.
Sort of.
Yeah. Anyways, but like Canada has a lot of various different. Like we were talking about that map the other day. Like Canada has a lot of immigration in it.
But I think like Canada, we're individualists.
Yeah.
We believe that everyone is equal, and everyone's equal before the law. So you can't punish someone harsher for any aspect about them. And I think we believe to a certain degree in. Now it gets hard because I think there is a cultural revolution going on in the world.
Yeah.
So stuff like we believe in free expression is in our law, but I'm not sure how many Canadians believe that anymore.
I mean, I just thought of the kind of funny part of Canadian culture, which I don't actually know how true it is, but we believe we're better than Americans.
Oh.
And I think we might actually have that slight amount of arrogance in our culture.
I think it's like, yeah, I think we're very similar to Americans in a lot of ways.
But we want to be different than them.
I think it's more like we are proud of our differences.
Yeah.
Like we're more polite, we're more environmentally conscious, we're more
we're smaller.
We're less religious. We're
more refined.
We're bigger. What do you mean?
But I mean population-wise, like we're...
Yeah. Well, we have less crowding, maybe.
Yeah, we're less dense.
We're more refined. We're not... So I think we have... we have slavery's right, for example. Yeah. Like, culture is very big things a lot of the time. And, we believe in democracy. And then you look at our history, where we come from First Nation, French, and English background.
Yeah.
And a lot of infighting in the country, and a lot of assimilation of First Nations. And so I think that we probably, I think some place like the UK,
yeah,
when they were talking about their own culture, wouldn't have to say what they drew on as much, because their country's old enough that a lot of it originated within the country. Yeah. But even they would say it came from Greece and from Rome, and the Greeks and the Romans, they probably got it from somewhere. My history isn't that great, but the values are, and a lot of Roman values are different from our current values.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what the discussion is in some ways. Yeah. So with Abba and Preach, he was talking about,
he basically didn't feel like a Canadian.
Right, and what he doesn't know what it means to feel like a Canadian or something, or
I think it's more because he didn't feel accepted as a Canadian, and he felt more like the culture he had. I'd have to rewatch the video.
Right, because so here's very similar actually to transgenderism, right?
Yeah. How
do you know? As in, I don't feel like a Canadian. Well, what does a Canadian feel like?
Yeah.
And I don't feel like a man, or I don't feel like a woman. How do you know?
Yeah.
Or I feel like a French person. I feel like a man. I feel like a woman. How do you know? I think that you can only you have no idea what it feels like on a certain level. You can look at the outward expressions and you can say, well, I love baguettes and wearing striped clothing, so I am French. Or you could say something a bit more like, I think, I believe in Enlightenment values, and I believe in Protestant religion or something. I think I'm British. I've got very traditional British values, something like that.
Yeah.
And so to me, saying I don't feel like a Canadian, I don't know, it sounds like you don't believe in the Canadian values, or maybe you don't know what they are. But I think you would know what they were without realizing it. Like, if you're in Canada and you kill and eat someone, you're pretty sure that that doesn't fly.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in New Guinea in like the 1500s, might be a different story.
Yeah.
If they're from an enemy tribe, obviously, because
Yeah.
people don't like murder anywhere. But even if you kill your enemy, if you killed an American as a Canadian, we would still think that was bad.
Yeah.
Nowadays. So yeah, I don't know what his problem was. I guess is sort of
Yeah.
where I'm going with this. So on a different note again, then I guess,
Yeah.
unless you have more to say about that.
No, I think you explore my idea of basically saying sort of like what a culture is really, because I wasn't even 100% certain on what culture is. Or
I'm not either. And I don't think.
it's just weird because, like, I could go to the classic stereotypes of Canadians, which is we really like hockey.
Yeah.
We like maple syrup.
Yeah.
We're polite.
Yeah.
And we travel a lot.
Yeah. And I think those are all part of. I think a culture is what you expect of others and is expected of you, and informed by your history and what you believe in, and yeah.
I mean, I'm not an insane fan of hockey, but I still see myself as Canadian.
Yeah, but you don't have to. I think a lot of it's the window dressing too. Like, all French people probably don't like accordion music, but
What?
that is a famous thing to come out of France, and so that's
Yeah.
part of their culture and their heritage. And I think like you can still be proud of Canadian hockey victories.
Yeah.
Like that's your cultural heritage in the
Like-
sense of like, wow, Canada's really good at hockey.
The greatest is still the greatest. Like Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
Is Wayne Gretzky. He's a Canadian hero.
Yeah, and so I think that's part of your culture is your heroes, your mythos.
Yeah.
Like you look at Vietnam. I think it's easier to look at other countries,
Yeah.
and then you can also compare yourself to what you're not. Like you look at China. We are not a collectivist dictatorship type thing. Although China, I wouldn't say is a dictatorship. It's almost like an ant colony. Like they are. It's oppressive in some ways, but I think it's oppressive in a way that they believe is working towards the country itself.
Yeah.
Like it's about. Like there's that movie Hero where at the end
Our
of
Land.
Our Land, where what China means,
Mm-hmm.
where an outside viewer could be like, oh yeah, but it's different in China. It's the land comes first. You protect your myth before you protect your people.
Yeah.
And you see that in all of China's actions. Like martial artists are the best. They cannot lose to new mixed martial arts. Or China is the cultural center of the world. We don't need
Anyone else's culture.
we don't need American like video games or whatnot. We don't want to play your games with skeletons and blood in them. That's wrong. Or
Yeah.
all we need from the rest of the world is the resources we don't have, like silver.
Yeah.
China's number one, like shut down the borders. Or you look at Vietnam, and they have a history of resistance. They fought off the Mongols, they fought off China, they fought off France, they fought off the United States.
Yeah.
They had. I was actually just learning about Vietnam recently, and they have their heroes. Like we have Wayne Gretzky. They have the sisters. I forgot their name, but they were like war heroes, like Joan of Arc.
Mm.
And Joan of Arc is the French sort of like cultural hero.
Yeah.
And I think your religion and your mythology, like the problem with being a colony is that a lot of your religion is inherited.
Yeah. And even a lot of your stories are inherited.
And a problem with being a colony that took over a massive land area with like 40 different peoples or 100 different peoples or whatever in it,
Yeah.
is that even that's mixed up. Like we have legends of Raven and we have legends of in the States they have legends of Coyote, and
Yeah.
but even that is just part of them. Like the Inuit have like demons everywhere, and the Haida are much more about these beautiful carvings and
and like even in where we are, there is something like 8 different territories that are all vastly different. Like some are permanently nomadic, while others have winter homes, while another group has permanent homes.
And a lot of their mythological creatures are protector beings.
Yeah.
Like, the Inuits had mostly demons, but around here I think it's mostly like benevolent gods.
Yeah.
Or not, they're not gods really, but...
Is the story of Raven here about the sun, is that like specific to Canada, or is that even specific to the Yukon with like him doing that whole thing?
I think it's Canadian. I don't know if it's just Yukon or not.
Yeah.
I think it's only Canadian though.
Yeah. Because I know
like Alaska might have it as well.
But because we have Old Crow.
Yeah.
And we have the Raven and the Wolf clan here. Like we actually...
Old Crow is weird though. I think it's actually a modern settlement between 2 old settlements.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, it's very animalistic over here anyways.
Yeah.
What do they call that? Animist.
Yeah. Yeah, we have like bear and crow and wolf
and in the state, and then in the States they have they have Raven, who's kind of like,
well, they have coyote and tarantula.
Yeah, they have and coyote is kind of more cruel.
Yeah.
Whereas like Raven is more of a trickster up here, but he's ultimately a hero.
Yeah.
Whereas they have whereas coyote's more like Loki.
Yeah.
Like he's more neutral. He's kind of one of the good guys.
Tarantula is his kind of evil sidekick. Not exactly sidekick. It's like a guy he hangs out with every once in a while. Tarantula is a glutton who works to further his own gains.
And then you have, like, in Mexico, you have the Aztec and the Mayans and whatnot. And their myths about looking across the ocean to see their gods coming to them.
Yeah.
Which is quite fascinating, that their gods came over the sea. And, like Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah.
And the Cherokee have their, like... well, I don't know much about the Cherokee, actually. Like, they have coyote as well, I think. But according to that book we have, there's that story of, like, the little men in the woods with the giant eyes.
Yeah.
And, like, the Hopkinsville goblins.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, we even have, like, modern things like the Jersey Devil.
Yeah, and I think that becomes part of your, like, New Jersey. Yeah. That's part of their culture. Mothman is part of...
Chicago.
Is it Chicago?
I think so.
Is that or Manhattan or something?
It's the place with the giant bridge.
San Francisco?
Maybe not. I'm pretty certain it's Chicago.
Yeah. Anyways, they have like Mothman. Like, I think your culture is your history and your beliefs. So actually, on the Hopkinsville Goblin note.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of it seems pretty fantastical having these aliens attack a cabin.
Yeah.
Basically, what happened was a guy was sitting outside on his porch and he saw something crash into the woods, and then their house was attacked by small glowing floating figures that they shot a few times.
Yeah.
And they kept retreating but coming back, and the bullets never seemed to wound them.
Yeah.
And so there was theories are that this was caused by monkeys or owls, or I'm suspicious that this was within 50 miles of a military base, because around here we had a military base, and there was a guy who, I think he's still alive even, possibly. Might not be, but he used to go up and watch the skies at night all the time in winter.
Yeah.
And he would see stars disappearing at night. And he
basically figured out there's something flying up there.
So he thought he was seeing UFOs.
Yeah.
Well, he was seeing UFOs. And nobody believed him. They thought he was crazy, but he's like, no, the stars disappear and reappear in a specific pattern. There is UFOs flying over, like, scouting out the Yukon.
Yeah.
And later it turned out that he was seeing drones.
Oh, those drones?
Yeah. He was seeing the first drones being tested.
Yeah.
Because the military didn't want to let anyone know about it, so they decided to test them over a bit of land in the world that had no people.
Yeah.
Except there's people everywhere.
Yeah.
And so even though we might not matter in the sense of we have few people, there's still enough of us that we can look up at the sky and see stuff.
Yeah.
And it turned out that he was seeing drones being tested for the first time, way before they were announced. And I think like the last year, the Navy released that information on those weird
Ships that fly
those
impossibly.
pills flying around.
Yeah.
Those could be new military planes.
Yeah.
Who knows? Could be anything. And I think the Hopkinsville Goblin, it could be similar. They could be robots that are being tested by the military. They could be genetically modified creatures. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
They could be in a suit of armor that they're testing. They could be a hallucination device they're testing.
Well, so there's going a bit to fiction here. So there's this book about like ghost hunters, right? And there's this one town which is having this horrible problem with this giant ghost that rises out of the graves, and all the other ghosts chase him and attack it. And it's like absolutely terrifying. It's this giant figure covered in black fire. So they find out that that's a suit of armor that people are putting on and going into the realm of the dead, and then walking around, and all the dead are getting pissed off that there's this giant suit of armor in the realm of the dead that's covered in silver, and they hate silver. And so they're trying to kill the person. And then in the living world, they just see its reflection.
Actually, do you know? I mean, who knows? You know Ian Colfer, like the Artemis Fowl guy?
Yeah.
He wrote that book about those invisible aliens that
Eat pain.
eat pain, which are actually very similar to the Hobsonville Goblin in looks and in terms of durability. Like, they were very strong, weren't they? Like,
They're indestructible besides electricity.
I wonder if they were inspired by it, actually. They're very similar.
Possibly.
Um,
Well, I mean, even on the Hopsville Goblin, that weird thing. So I've been watching a cryptozoologist channel, and he mostly talks about Bigfoot. And he's the video that I sent you. And he's absolutely fascinating. And I think one of the interesting things about him is he seems pretty certain that there's Bigfoot out there. But one of the things that he talks about, which is incredible, so gorillas, like European and biologists didn't recognize them until like less than 200 years ago.
yeah, okay, so that's interesting. I want to talk about that, actually. That's exactly why I brought up the Hobsonville Goblin, was to talk about gorillas.
Right.
Okay, so, but for a different reason than you, wait, so keep going.
Yeah, so I'm basically saying, people didn't know that gorillas were a thing.
Yeah.
I think they're discovered in the 1800s, like officially.
Okay.
But the tribes around the area knew that there's giant men, and they had legends about giant men that would attack them sometimes, and the mountain demons, like they had different names for them. And eventually a biologist went out into the mountains, and he killed one of the smaller, there's two different kinds of mountain gorilla. He killed the smaller one with his party, and they couldn't get the body back, so they cut off its head and brought it back. And the whole society there is like, what is this, some sort of joke? Are you trying to mess with us? Like, what the heck is this thing? And he was basically called a charlatan, and it's like respected biologist. Later on, they got full body of the gorilla, and then kept fancying like, oh, this guy wasn't a charlatan. He actually found a gorilla, and now he found the silverback mountain gorilla.
So that's really interesting, because I only saw the one video he did on the Hobsonville Goblin.
Yeah.
And I've seen none of his other stuff.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about is a ancient Phoenician named Hanno the Navigator.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of him or
I
not.
don't think so.
Okay. Actually, side note on Hanno the Navigator. Paul Anderson, the guy who wrote Three Hearts, Three Lions, wrote a book called The 12 Immortals or something, or A Ship to the Stars, something like that, which is about 12 people throughout time who cannot die and they don't know why, and they meet up eventually. And Hanno the Navigator is one of them. And I just think that's a really, really cool book idea. And Paul Anderson, he kind of did it all first, didn't he? He's a neat guy.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Hanno the Navigator was a Phoenician explorer.
Yeah.
And they were the people that founded Carthage.
Yeah.
Which eventually had the war with Rome and Hannibal of Carthage and all that.
Yeah.
So this was before Carthage, I believe. And they were going, I want to say into Africa, but it could have been into the Middle East.
Yeah.
And they had local guides, and they came across a tribe of hairy people, like these massive hairy people who were mostly women.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what they were, and when they tried to get closer to them to communicate with them, they were attacked. So they killed them. And then they skinned them, and they brought them back to Alexandria. Mm-hmm. And they put them in the library of Alexandria. And then when the fire of Alexandria happened, they were destroyed, these pelts. Yeah. And the locals knew about these this tribe of people, and they called them the Gorillae, I believe. Mm. And I could be wrong, but either the Greeks like sort of back translated gorilla into their own word, or gorilla was a word that these locals had.
Yeah.
And I think it means the tribe of mostly women or something like that.
Well, gorilla biology, their family groups, is usually men, the male gorillas,
Yeah.
will leave a group later on,
Yeah.
but they're guaranteed to leave it, and they'll never come back. And so mostly family groups of gorillas are a lot of women with one man. And the men go out to form their own group, and then the young females go off, and they'll find the man with his new group. And so gorillas, actually, their culture is... Gorillas, anyways, I know. Like, apes have a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
But gorillas is a lot of women with one man or two men.
Yeah, so that's interesting because that lends more credence to it. So we don't actually know what Hanno the Navigator found.
Yeah.
He could have actually found a group of savage people that were very aggressive. Or he could have just found gorillas and thought they were people. But I don't think it really matters either way for the purpose of the Hobsonville Goblin.
Yeah.
Because basically what happened was he came across a fantastical thing.
Yeah.
A people that weren't quite people.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's still no reason why. For example, let's say that there is a species of humanoids on Earth, apes or whatever else, that are invisible even. And a crashing military test plane
Scared them.
And caused them to act erratically.
Yeah.
Or even there's just they don't even have to be flying. Like imagine are they gibbons? They're like they're like a monkey with really long arms.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen one of those move, they basically can fly.
Yeah.
Because they can swing better than any other animal on Earth. Like their hand-eye coordination, I think, is the best there is, or something.
Absolutely creepy looking.
And it looks like they're flying when they go between trees.
Yeah.
Like they just go. They can launch themselves 30 feet, and they just move in a straight line, like they fly basically.
Yeah.
So there's no reason there couldn't be like like they guessed monkeys, but like something slightly different that can jump like crazy, or maybe a lighter than air invisible creature.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, so this is a different video he made talking about things. So Norwegians had a creature which was basically translated, it's called the devilfish. Or a different name for it is like a giant monster. It's the kraken.
Yeah.
The Norwegian kraken, though, was an island that moved. It was massive. The Europeans, when they learned about it, or I guess the English and stuff, also combined that with the giant squid, which is a monster with tentacles. There's that story of the woman who was like really long with...
Yeah.
And it's probably talking about giant squid. But...
very easily to confuse with a woman.
Yeah. Anyways, giant squid was a creature that didn't exist. And the kraken, like we've had this thought, the kraken. So there was a fisherman who was going out, and his boat got attacked by an absolutely ridiculously huge squid. And his son took a hatchet and cut off one of his tentacles, and it ran away. And they kept the tentacle, and people were like, what is this? Is this some sort of joke? 20 years later, we found the corpse of a giant squid.
Yeah.
And like, what the heck is this thing? And we found the colossal squid as well. And like, what are these? Finally, we've gotten footage of these things alive. And that's like in the last 20 years.
It's very recent.
And these creatures were legends, like ridiculously huge squids.
Wait, it's crazy. Tsunamis?
Yeah.
Like, we knew they existed, but we didn't know how they worked. And rogue waves.
Yeah.
Like, our grandpa, I believe, saw rogue waves during the Korean War.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until, like, 2003 or something that they confirmed their existence with satellites.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of people saying, like, yeah, they're out there. These things that don't exist.
Yeah, well,
but
even there's this, so in one area, there is a civil war going on. And there's this, species of, they're called lion killer apes.
It's hardcore.
And they're these giant apes. They, kill lions. They're incredibly aggressive. They're really brutal. No one's ever, they hunt in groups. We haven't seen them much. And people are like, oh, a new species of ape? That sounds interesting. So biologists went out looking for them, and they had a really hard time finding them. Eventually, they're found. They are slightly bigger type of, I think, orangutan or something. It doesn't matter what they were, but they're like slightly bigger. They're a species that all exists. But what was interesting about them is their culture. So they lived on groups in the ground, and they are impossible to find. And that is because at the time of the Civil War, starvation was happening. And bushmeat is basically any animal you can kill and eat is food. And so these things are like, holy crap, people are eating us. And so they became the most elusive group of apes ever. And people hunting them couldn't find them. The biologists couldn't find them. Like, eventually after the war and things calmed down, one guy finally found them. And he's like, I had so much trouble tracking these things down. And then, like, now that we know how to find them, they're easier to find. But it's like, for a while, there's like these myths of these giant apes in this one area that were like lion killers and elusive. And
if you want another example of, I think this is a sea serpents.
Yeah.
The giant oarfish
Yeah.
is a sea serpent. You look at it and you're like, oh, there you go. That's what a sea serpent is. It's a fish that's like 40 feet long.
Well, especially deep sea creatures. Like, if something floats to the surface, we're like, okay.
I think the stuff like the Hobsonsville Goblin and stuff like the pillboxes flying above the Pacific and the Atlantic, it's arrogant to dismiss them as being made up stories.
Yeah.
I think it is also arrogant to claim you know what's going on, unless for some weird reason you do.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can jump to aliens.
Yeah.
Or jump to Bigfoot, or jump to dinosaur. But I think
here we have a legend of a dinosaur that's still around, and like footprints of it have been found. Actually, up here we have a dinosaur up here, and I think like we still don't know what it is, but there's like footprints of a dinosaur that have been found in 2 different locations.
Wow. But yeah, as I was saying, so it's arrogant to assume it's like an alien or a dinosaur or a Bigfoot or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's not an alien or a dinosaur or Bigfoot or whatever, because it's not unlikely. Like, we don't know everything.
Yeah.
Especially with the oceans, we know nothing.
Yeah.
But even in forests, like the Amazon, we've barely explored the Amazon.
Do you remember the first finding of the eye? What was his name? The guy who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Well, it wasn't the first. That was like the last sighting of an eye or something.
For a long time.
Yeah.
But like, he had so much trouble finding the damn little critter.
Yeah. And I think they thought the ivory-billed woodpecker was extinct, and then they found one like 50 years later. We don't see everything. Yeah. They thought gray whales were going extinct, and then it turned out they were moving.
Yeah.
And in the ocean, there's possibly my favorite animal on Earth, whatever it's called, Whale 52 or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is a creature, probably. It might be a machine or a volcanic vent or something.
Yeah.
But I think it follows the same singing patterns as whales or something.
It's the loudest creature on Earth.
Yeah. And it's like 2 or 3 times as loud as a blue whale.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we can hear it. We don't know where it is, but we can. And I think that like something like that is just really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no reason to think it doesn't exist. It's just like skepticism. I think you should be skeptical. It could be even like, I don't know, a Chinese prank, let's say. Chinese government has a really big loudspeaker in the ocean.
Yeah. Well, that's actually another thing interesting about Bob Dylan is when he talks about pranks, he's like, for some of these pranks that happen, that's equally fantastical as the thing here, because like, that's one of them. I'll show you the picture later. But it's like, if this was a prank, this is a several $100,000 prank with a chance of getting shot.
I mean, sometimes people have money to burn.
Yeah, it's like, this is a several $100,000 prank with the chance of getting shot. So it could be the case.
Yeah.
And either, like, that's one of the things, like, either or likely.
I heard a story from, I think it was in Alberta. Might have been a Quebecer. There was a bunch of friends from the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
Like oil tycoon types.
Yeah.
And they wanted to go snowmobiling because they'd never been. So they went to, I think it was Alberta. Let's say Alberta. They went to Alberta and they hired some guides to teach them how to snowmobile. Yeah. And so they bought like 3 snowmobiles each so they could try them out. And they had a great time. And then they donated the snow machines to the people that their guides. They just
Yeah.
gave them to them and they left. So the story might seem fine. A snow machine is like $15,000
Yeah.
sometimes. You know, 5,000 even, let's say, on a like cheap
Yeah.
sort of thing. So, and I can't remember what he said. How much? I think that he said they spent about like $60,000 or like $80,000
Yeah.
in snow machines. However many they ended up buying.
Or
and
is
how-
that like Oil Prince who spent like 100,000 on Dota?
Yeah, yeah, or like that. I think it's the same guy. He donates like 10,000 on Twitch all the time.
Yeah, no, if you're a Twitch streamer he likes, he'll donate. Or if you have a Kickstarter to a video game he likes, he might buy it.
Yeah. So these people, they gave the snow machines to their guides,
Yeah.
but they didn't realize that they were handing them like, you know, 1 to 4 years salary. They have so much money. There's no concept of it. So I think a prank of like $100,000, $200,000,
Yeah.
it could happen.
Yeah.
Like Notch gave $1 million to make Age of Wonders 3.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just, I'm a billionaire, I'm gonna spend money. Why not? But yeah. So I think skepticism is saying, yeah, it isn't dismissing things. It's saying it could be anything.
Yeah.
That's what skepticism is. And so, and that one like skeptic who said, skeptic in quotation marks, who said the Hobsonsville Goblin was a circus act that escaped with monkeys covered in silver paint.
Yeah.
Like, that is so specific. Like, does he know there was a circus in town at the time trading like silver coated monkeys? Because if that wasn't an act that was in the location and they lost their monkeys on that night, then that's a ridiculous statement to make.
Yeah. That's like as fantastical almost as aliens.
That's more fantastic. Like,
Yeah.
aliens are basically guaranteed to exist.
Yeah.
Aliens that can travel between worlds, pretty likely. Whereas some random circus act,
Having silver monkeys escape.
and then afterwards, after hearing the family left over the course of the next like 5 years,
Yeah.
abandoned the place. The police were investigating,
The military investigate.
and the circus was just like, yeah, let's not tell anyone. I mean, maybe they're like, how much trouble would we be in if we told them?
There is always that thing of how much trouble will we be in.
Another thing I guess you could have, like, you know, if you want to, you can come. It's fun to come up with theories.
Yeah.
Chinese lanterns with like a sheet draped over them.
Those could survive. They would survive a bolt and drift away.
Yeah, like, but like tapping on. I mean, they bounce against the window. Like,
Yeah.
it could happen. Wind currents are weird.
Yeah.
I mean, that actually.
Sounds pretty creepy.
Yeah. Now that I say it, actually, it doesn't sound too unlikely either. And especially if they were like remote controlled somehow. Like, I think there's being tests, or it's already doable. Yeah. No, there was tests. The Roswell incident. That's what the guy was testing. There was a UFO sighting in the United States, but it was a guy with a actual like weather balloon, where he was testing ways to control weather balloons in midair using electric currents. So if you ran an electric current, it could move it up or down or left or right. So if the military, that's very useful.
Yeah.
If the military was doing that with balloons in the area,
Yeah.
and their balloons were bouncing off against the house,
Yeah.
then people are like, whoa, what's this? Like, and I don't know, like if the balloons, for whatever reason, had wires dangling off of them, or
Yeah.
they'd painted scary faces on them for some reason.
Or even early tests of drones, like and then like the lights on it could be glowing eyes.
Yeah. And let's see, when that was like 50 or something years ago though, right? Or 70 years? Like,
The Hopstill Goblins.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because the military normally declassifies stuff within that time. But sometimes they wait until like they actually use them for the first time on the battlefield.
Yeah.
But it's weird, like,
Well, I mean, the space jet. So there's a plane that people like saw. It was very fast.
yeah,
And it's flying in the atmosphere.
yeah.
And it was just doing loops of the Earth. And it was doing it for ages. And people had no idea what it was. Eventually, the military says, okay, we made a plane that can basically like stay in low atmosphere for a ridiculous amount of time. It's unmanned. That's what you saw. And that's all the information they gave. It's like, we have no idea about the engines or anything. It's just, yeah, we had a plane that was going in circles. And we wanted to test a low atmosphere plane and see how long we could keep it there.
Yeah. Oh, I have to say something though. That channel with the cryptid dude,
Yeah.
he really hurt his credibility with his medieval painting. Like, where he was saying like, oh, there's a UFO in this picture. It's a painting. You can put whatever you want in it. And I don't think you have to hide UFOs from the church. I really don't think they would care. Yeah. Like, that's more like something like Darren Brown would do in one of his books. Like,
yeah. Well, I think why he had that is a lot of the time one of the big things is he talks about First Nations. Mm-hmm. Like when he talks a lot about Sasquatch, like aliens aren't his field.
Yeah.
But a lot of times there is, oh, it's this thing in First Nation 11. Oh, there's a picture of this thing. Like the First Nations know about them. They have names for them. That's like where we get our names.
Yeah, that makes much more sense. Like,
and so I think it's just him like.
But like a painting with a flying boat in it, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's just a piece of art.
Well, do you know the significance? Like people say, oh, the Greeks had laptops. They did, but they were wax laptops. Mm-hmm. And the Greeks had palm tablets as well. They had tablets, but they were wax tablets.
Yeah.
So you look at a picture of a Greek with a laptop, you are correct, but it's there for a reason because they actually owned one. But it wasn't a mechanical device you could type on. Yeah. Or an electronic device. And like a flying boat, that sounds like some sort of mythological reference without knowing anything. Mm-hmm. That doesn't... And even if you go with... You have to hide from the church. Mm-hmm. The Masons could use a flying boat as a symbol for something. Like, meet me tomorrow at dawn or whatever after this art show. Like, you can't just quickly say, like, that's a UFO. If there was a UFO that an artist saw, I see no reason why he wouldn't just paint a painting of a UFO. Yeah. And then he would write a little write-up for it and say, this is what I saw on whatever day. Yeah. Like the background of the Virgin Mary having, like, a flying boat is, like, such a stretch that it kind of... You hurt your whole argument by appearing crazy. Yeah. And maybe later I will regret saying this because I will learn more about that specific picture, but if that picture does have a better story to it, he probably should have told it. Yeah. I mean, like in Spore, I love it how you can be abducted by aliens. Do you die if you get abducted? Or...
Yes.
Oh, you don't get to go to a different planet?
No, you instantly die.
That'd be so cool. I think you can also destroy it if you're strong enough.
You can.
And that's so cool because eventually you become the abductor. Like,
yeah.
It's and there's no reason that couldn't happen. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty neat. But yeah, I just thought like Hannah the Navigator, and that's really interesting that you talked about gorillas as well. Yeah. Because they were two different things I'd learned about, and I was like, wait a minute, like it's the same thing of people not knowing enough about the world they live in.
And the interesting thing. So, cryptozoology is a very dismissed field. Mm-hmm. But the actual meaning of cryptozoology is the study of creatures that are hard to find. Like a cryptid creature is something that's...
Like a giant squid.
Yeah, it's hard to find. Like a cryptid behavior, like those apes, those giant lion killer apes were cryptid apes.
Or the golden moles.
Yeah. Yeah, golden mole, that's the cryptid. The birds of paradise dancing, that's cryptid behavior. It just means rare and hard to find.
John Cena.
You don't see it coming.
Yeah, they're... Well, I think like xenobiology as well. It's kind of figuring out what's possible within the realms of biology. Yeah. And it's a really interesting one. Like, okay, what could exist and where would we find it then?
Yeah. Well, so one of the interesting ones, I can't remember which lake it is, but is it the Okanagan, like near where our grandfather lives?
Yeah, Okanagan.
Ogopogo.
Yeah.
Ogopogo, the Loch Ness Monster. Yeah. So I can't remember which lake it was. It might even be the Loch, but they did a study of DNA in this lake. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, what's going on in this lake? And it turns out there's a bunch of giant eels in the lake. They have the DNA of giant eels that usually shouldn't be there, and they've actually found some of the eels, and they're a species. What they figure is at one point a river basically going to this area had some giant eels end up in it, that because there is giant river eels, and they basically end up in a lake, and they adapted to the lake, and so they became lake eels, which is incredibly rare. But this could be the monster of this lake. That is one of the thoughts.
And I think there's no reason, especially in the ocean, that. Like there's, those ideas, do megalodons still exist? Or even depending on, like sharks can live for hundreds of years. Yeah. So dinosaur, it's kind of a different scale though. Yeah. There's not going to be a dinosaur that's still alive because millions of years is very different from hundreds. Yeah. like if any creature has lived millions of years, that'd be very impressive.
Yeah.
And it would almost need a different mind in order to survive. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe,
Or it'd have to be incredibly simple.
but I wonder if like something like Whale 52. I mean, you never know.
Well, I mean, I wonder if there's any hydras that have like lived for like thousands of years.
You'd think like just like thousands,
Well,
sure.
even the oldest trees, though, like what the oldest trees we have are like around 800 years at most.
No, there's bristlecone pines that are several thousand years old. I think there's like, I don't know the number. It's like 4,000 or something.
Okay.
But 4,000 is nothing compared to like 20 million.
Yeah.
So I don't really see. But on the other hand, so 8, like being old enough, I don't see being a factor. Like even a biologically immortal creature like a hydra or a sponge or something, eventually random chance like an earthquake is going to, like mountains die in the span of millions of years.
Yeah.
And volcanoes die and islands die. And
have you ever seen a dead volcano? They look creepy.
on its side.
No, they, because of the material volcanoes are made of, once they're done spitting out material, they start eroding, and they look like blasted giant columns.
That's cool. But someplace like the Amazon.
Yeah. What was it? The Amazon has like 100 species per square foot or something.
No reason why like a Diplodocus family, you know? Just, I mean, the amount of food they had to eat was kind of crazy, but I think something like an elasmosaur in the ocean or in...
Well, what are those stupid fish called?
I don't think most fish are considered very smart.
Sorry, it's just the kabuto.
Oh, the coelacanth, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the fish with bony arms that likes walking on walls.
Yeah.
When it's underwater, like walks on long cracks.
Yeah, fish with legs, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are...
Those are dinosaurs. Those are older than dinosaurs.
Yeah, they survived.
Mm-hmm. I mean...
Crocodiles as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, like chickens or something. Like some species of bird are like similar, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, like especially stuff like the coelacanth or whatever, and
the
crocodiles
and the spiral shell thing that goes. Blah, blah, blah.
And I think
the cuttlefish, is that what they are?
Yeah, nautilus is
Nautilus, yeah. Omastar.
And I think even is it like some species of whale are like pretty ancient.
Yeah, the blue whale is ridiculously old.
Yeah, so I think there is a precedent for stuff being around.
Also, we don't know how old blue whales are.
Pretty old. Like individual whales, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, you know what's great about pollution, right? Is that hopefully in our lifetime, Whale 52 will die and float to the surface, and then we'll get to see it.
Well, I mean, even on the Age of Animals, like, there's the whale with the harpoon in it.
Yeah.
And there was that tiger shark that had 18th century armor from Venice in its gut.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, if this was like preserved armor. No, it ate the armor around the 18th century.
Well, and there's like pet turtles that get passed down for like 300 years.
Yeah.
And the one that I'm kind of weirded out by is, I think there's fish that have done this as well, but bacteria is the main one that like are frozen
or dehydrated.
Yeah, and then they like restore, and like, how do you count age at that point? Because like then you can have like thousands or millions of year old things.
Those are actually a huge worry of developing like that was one of the really big fears of going to the Antarctic.
Was bringing back some disease.
Was getting one of those, yeah, or developing areas like in the far north of Canada, because that's where they tend to dehydrate or freeze themselves, and then that thing comes back and it's a disease that sure is old, but we can't deal with it.
Yeah.
And we turn out to be an appropriate target for it to basically kill.
Yeah. It'd be unlikely, but pretty bad.
Yeah, but it's still like there is a worry. Like I remember when we were doing the disaster project in my grade 4-5, because you need to give 4-5 students existential crises. That was one of the disasters we discussed.
That's a cool one. We didn't. I think. Yeah, we just had like hurricanes and tornadoes.
Yeah, we had those. We had firestorms, nuclear fallout.
You had firestorms?
Yeah.
I had to convince the teacher that firestorms were real. So maybe I did some good.
Water spouts,
the creature.
acid rain. But the firestorms was one of the disturbing ones.
Acid rain is I think I started my project on acid rain.
It's so boring.
But it's boring. Yeah.
I've experienced acid rain in Alberta.
It's
it tastes gross.
It's the coolest name for the lamest thing. It's this water has a low pH. Ooh.
The polluted water that rains down. Yeah. Whereas a firestorm is literally burning.
Yeah, it's well, firestorm is just the heat from the fire. It's basically just a fire.
Well, there's two kinds of firestorms actually.
Well, I guess if a tornado picks up a fire.
Well, so there's the firestorm, which is a lot of wind picks up fire and that falls down again.
But then it's the fire's generated enough heat that it's creating its own sort of wind.
Yeah. Then... the other firestorm, I think this has only occurred a very few times. It's been a long time since I remember doing the project. But basically, a factory wasn't regulated right, and its exhaust, the stuff is pouring out, caught fire, and then the particles started raining down, so it's literally a burning cloud was raining down on a town nearby.
Right.
And it was a huge problem.
Yeah, I guess that could that could count. And then you look at other planets like Jupiter and Venus where...
Acid storms.
Yeah. Although I don't... I guess a natural disaster is still natural.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering at what level you call is a storm on Venus a clear day?
Well, it's interesting. I remember just on the radio briefly, I heard someone was talking about natural disasters, and it's if a hurricane happens in the middle of the ocean and no one's around, it's not a natural disaster. However, if it hits a town, if it say is a natural disaster, and she's basically saying, if we built our infrastructure, which we have the capability of getting near to, that basically making those storms not as bad, we call it a bad storm and not a natural disaster. So during the time when Haiti has earthquake, I think a city in Chile, I could be wrong, but another city nearby had an earthquake of almost the same magnitude. The damage in that other city was far less, far fewer people. I think Haiti had 80 times more casualties than this one city.
Yeah.
So it still sucked for that city, but wasn't the disaster the same level that Haiti had.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting definition. If a tsunami hit Antarctica, would we care?
Japan has the best disaster.
Yeah.
Because they live on one of the nastiest places on the planet.
Actually, today, as we are recording this, I believe, I think it's today, is the anniversary of Japan being hit by Fukushima. Of the tsunami hitting the Fukushima reactor and whatever district of Japan. And they weren't able to handle that, even though they had the best anti-earthquake and tsunami stuff in the world, and it still devastated them.
Yeah, but what's interesting, so on the radio, CBC, I don't know how much she knows, but her job is studying this stuff and preparing, is saying that Japan could have put more funding into that, and they should have, but still, even Japan, that has the most funding and the most preparedness, doesn't do as much as they should for the disasters they get. But Japan, right, Tokyo, and most of Japan, once every year, they practice a full-scale evacuation. Once a year.
Here's the thing about experts, though. Their field always seems like the most important thing in the world, but there's only so much money.
Yes.
Japan should be putting more work into artificial meat. Japan should be putting more work into self-sustainability. They should be putting more work into clean energy. They should be, they can only do so much. Mm-hmm. They're probably doing as good a balance as they can. Why is there only 90 characters in Smash? Mm-hmm. Come on, Japan.
However, the thing is, the tsunamis that Japan gets, right? I mean, they have been ludicrous. But if, the train doesn't allow for it. But let's say England got hit by one of those tsunamis. That would suck for them.
Yeah. Or Anchorage.
Yeah.
Which they have been. Anchorage has had... I think it's Anchorage.
The highest tsunami ever.
Yeah. It's 1,000 feet or something.
Yeah, but that's cheating.
That sounds impossible. By the way, if you don't know about it, it got funneled down a a very narrow valley. Yeah. So the water didn't actually rise 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
It got squished.
Yeah. And it's there's a painting of it which looks absolutely terrifying.
Can you imagine? Just You can't even run to the top of a mountain.
See, the thing is, I can imagine, because that's one of my nightmares, is waves of that scale.
I almost want a nightmare like that just to like... I love...
No, so it's the worst ever, right? Because you're on a beach, right? And you know, like when you're climbing up sand dunes?
Yeah.
Like, remember those giant sand dunes we were in Mexico? And how you got really tired, like when you get near the top?
Yeah.
So, imagine those sand dunes are the top of the beach.
Yeah.
And you're down in the valley at the bottom. One of those waves is coming, and you have to get up that hill. That's the nightmare. It's trying to run away from that wave up that hill, and you're just like, I can't get any further. So you can escape it, but it's hard.
You know Siren Head?
Yeah.
I kind of like that sort of thing. Like the...
SCP?
No.
Or what's it called? The seeing a face in like a piece of wood.
No. What I like is a thing that is so large that all you can do is accept it. Like, you know that painting of Protogenitor or whatever it's called, that magic card?
Yeah.
I love those things that are so... Like, a wave that's 1,000 feet tall, right?
Yeah.
All you can do is, like, stop and watch. And, like, I think, like, Siren Head as well is, like, this massive thing off in the distance, like that famous video. And I love that sort of imagery so much. It's so big, all you can do is observe it. Like, I think, like, Shadow of the Colossus, I guess, is kind of about that. But it's not within the... Like, the world's empty, so it kind of, I think, loses... Breath of the Wild, though, like, the first time you see one of the divine beasts...
Yeah.
And even, like... Oh, the first time you see a divine beast is Ruda or whatever, the bird one.
Yeah.
But you don't even realize it because it's so big. You're like, oh, so there's an island over there. And then, like, the first one I saw was the camel.
Yeah.
And I just, like, there's something terrifying, but also compelling about the terror of something so large that it changes your perception of the world.
Yeah.
Like, I think if I saw one of those land movers, I'd probably feel the same, like those giant machines.
Yeah, well...
Skyscrapers kind of do that as well, I guess.
So, when I was coming back here from Alberta, I had to take a plane ride. Like, this was when I came back for, I think, Thanksgiving? Or maybe, no, the school break. Anyways, I went through one of the largest cities in Canada, and I was like, these buildings are too tall. Like, I actually had this problem, like, especially when I'm in Vancouver. I'm slightly more used to Vancouver. But I get extreme anxiety from being in big cities because the buildings are too big.
I remember Skytree? Like,
yeah.
You couldn't see the top from the bottom?
Yeah, no. Like Tokyo's actually, it's spread out. So Tokyo's actually, you can deal with a little better.
Have you seen that? Netflix has a new show called High Rise Invasion. Have you seen it?
No.
There's like a tower kind of comes into Tokyo. Yeah. This giant tower, and it like dwarfs Skytree, and it's just sort of like, it's kind of interesting just looking at it. Like,
yeah. Well, it's just like being oppressed by giant buildings. I mean, I used to have problems being near mountains, and so then if that's like problems, I had troubles being near a mountain, and then you put me into the narrow corridors of Vancouver with all those big buildings. That's like.
But I love those like off in the distance.
Like
things.
It's just like. Big and moving.
Yeah, but what I think is like a really cool component of it is like in Breath of the Wild that you can touch it.
Yeah.
Because like in Call of Cthulhu, I think the game's called. It's still really cool. Like they have this storm with Cthulhu behind it.
Yeah.
And it's like taller than the mountain you're on.
Yeah.
I think it's cool, but because it's almost like it's projected on a screen.
Yeah.
So there's like that air of like, it's not really.
Was it like, you would like it if in Call of Cthulhu, like, Cthulhu shows up. You're like, crikey, look at the size of that sucker. Go and poke it with a stick.
Well, more like if its head, like, poked out of the clouds and, like, pushed you or something.
Yeah.
Like, another... So there's this image I always have tried to draw. I'm not a very good artist, but it's like an Apatosaurus-type creature, but much, much larger. And its head is swinging towards you. And to me, that's an important part of it, because... It's the large thing is coming towards you. And even though it's like 100 meters or a kilometer away, it doesn't have to take a step towards you to touch you. It just turns, and then it's touching you. And like that's sort of like, this is now part of your reality. Before it was just over there. Yeah. But now it's here. Kind of if you stand under a wind turbine.
Wind turbine.
And you see the blade come towards you. It's like,
Yeah.
like those things. I was actually looking at the wind turbine on the mountain the other day. You can't normally see it because of the light and everything.
Yeah.
I could see it, and it's like a fifth the height of the mountain. Like, it's
Yeah.
tall.
Yeah.
It's crazy how tall they are. And if you ever see a video of like a truck transporting one, like they are massive.
Yeah.
They're very cool. I like big things, especially when they interact with you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or a giant reaches down his finger to you.
I'm definitely, definitely in my, definitely in my books. I want to do stuff like that. Yeah, very cool. I like that scale of impossibility.
Mm.
Have you ever done the flying divine beast in Breath of the Wild?
No.
Okay, I think that's like the coolest part of the game. But I won't spoil it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, shall we wrap up there?
Yep.
All right.